Today we're going to talk about restorative practices. Restorative practices is an emerging social sciences field that focuses on strengthening relationships for individuals and communities through strategic communication, including restoration when needed. Restorative practices began being implemented in educational settings in the 1990s in Australia. So, restorative practices in the school setting is a set of principles and practices used in schools to promote positive behavior, reduce discipline issues, and to enhance learning. There's a lot of benefits of restorative practices in schools. It helps to build positive relationships and to have a more connected school community. It also helps by reducing disciplinary issues and expulsions, promoting responsibility and accountability with students and staff and other stakeholders. It's a really prolific practice. There are several components of restorative practices. Circles, which are used to support communication and relationship building, restorative discussions, which happen between any student, staff, anybody that's been harmed, and it includes the person who's been harmed, the person who harmed, and also a facilitator. This is facilitated by a trained member of the school community. Restorative conferences are more of a formal meeting process, so these happen with serious issues, where individuals may be facing really impactful consequences like expulsion. They may be looking at going to a different school setting, or maybe even doing school differently altogether. So implementing restorative practices in your school is pretty unique. Even if an entire school system employs restorative practices, each school must be given the space to develop and implement according to their community's needs. You have to identify the unique qualities of your school and possible areas to address first. So, certification. Restorative practice certification is an important step. Several staff members in the building should be formally trained and certified, and they can teach the staff the uniqueness of circles and the techniques to use with those restorative discussions, but you do need those certified people in your building. Student leadership is an important piece of this. Allowing students to take a leadership role will help to deeply embed restorative practices into the school culture. Older students can be trained for peer mediation, and they can take a leadership role in choosing circle topics. There's various roles that each person plays in restorative practices. The teacher's role is primarily to build relationships, to form authentic bonds with students and families, which looks like rich conversations about real life things. Those relationships have to be authentic, or that restorative practices piece just sort of falls flat. So a teacher's role is also to set up a practice of circles and other intentional ways for students to connect to each other and to their teacher. So for an example, SEL practices of morning meetup and buddy up. Facilitating restorative conversations when needed is really important on a teacher's end. So there may be a disagreement on the playground, or maybe there's a disagreement in the classroom. It may be as simple as so-and-so took my pencil, or so-and-so wouldn't share a ball. Those are a really good opportunity to have a really quick restorative conference. Sometimes it's bigger. I overheard so-and-so saying this about me in the lunchroom, or even bigger than that sometimes. Those are good opportunities for teachers to take a bigger role. Teachers also want to be an active listener with empathy and respect for feelings involved. So the student's role. The student's role is really to be engaged and actively participating in those circles and in other community building activities. Their role is also to participate in restorative discussions when needed. So that part's not optional. If they do the harming, they have to participate. But the cool thing is, when you're in that moment with students and adults, because everyone has an opportunity to say their part and that person who's facilitating it is there, there's a lot of pressure relieved. Also, during these restorative discussions, the student has the relief of knowing that they are not necessarily being punished. They are given that opportunity to work through that rather than just skipping straight to consequences and punishment. Students can be trained to facilitate peer mediation. They can also be respectful with others with actions and words, and to be accountable of unexpected behaviors. Families and communities have a role as well. So the school can provide support to parents by holding a workshop that teaches those principles and allows them to participate in a circle. Also, teaching them and showing them through some type of role play during that workshop could be a really big important piece. Partnerships with communities with community agencies can be really beneficial. It helps to build relationships with students in the building and resources for those parents outside of the building. So, conferences. In the event of a serious incident, including families in that restorative conference is really important. Restorative conferences, again, are that time where they're facing a serious implication: expulsion, alternate school setting, suspension, and other things. So when you implement restorative practices, you want to make sure that you take the time to assess the impact. What impact is this having on our students, teachers, stakeholders? So having stakeholder surveys, pre and post test, including students with permission. You need permission to survey students. Stakeholder surveys help to show us what's happening, how people are feeling about the process, and if that process is working. So in that, you want to have data review once you have those surveys. School-sanctioned data review, like reviewing attendance data, behavior data, overall academic performance. Are those things benefiting from restorative practices? Having collaboration and feedback, providing a judgment-free space for continuous collaboration and feedback for staff. So examples, PLC and monthly staff meetings. That non-judgmental piece is so vital for staff particularly. They need that space to be able to express how restorative practices is going in their room, the kinks that may be happening. They need that administrative support and that additional support from those supportive staff members like counselors, psychologists, EC people, speech therapists, all of those extra staff that can help support that, because teachers have a lot on their plate, but we also really need their buy-in to build up those authentic relationships. No program comes without challenges. So implementing new initiatives in school can be challenging due to support, due to buy-in, just like we're talking about, that non-judgmental zone. Specifically, some challenges in implementing restorative practices may be meeting with resistance from staff. Students could be resistant, or parents could be resistant. A lot of times resistance comes from not understanding the process. So that piece with the family and community and those workshops are really important so that people really understand what it is you're offering with this. Challenges could also be that they're perceived as not strong enough discipline or viewed as not punitive enough. We still have a lot of people in our communities and within our schools who believe that discipline should happen straightforwardly every time an action is taken. We all know that that progressive thought process has to be in place. We have to approach problems from a different standpoint. We have to figure out how to put that human piece into that behavior request of a student. And without those relationships, you don't have that. Restorative practices really helps to build that up and helps to mitigate it when and if that becomes an issue. It can cause a struggle due to the need and the shift in the culture in the school community too. So there are a few challenges to be considered. So there's a couple of myths about restorative practices. So myth number 1, restorative practices means no consequences. Well, the reality is restorative practices requires all parties to be honest about their part and work together to find a way to move forward productively. Although this is a non-traditional disciplinary action, this does require a lot from both sides. Myth number 2, this is only used to deal with conflict. Absolutely not. In fact, daily circles to open your day as a class and other strategic connections throughout the day, peer-to-peer, teacher-to-student, teacher-to-teacher, it's imperative to reducing the restorative discussions altogether. And when they are needed, these proactive measures make the process more effective. The impact, positive impact on school climate, race and equity in disciplinary action, reduction in suspension and expulsion, student-teacher relationships improve, reduction in behavioral referrals, academic improvements, and attendance improvements. Restorative practices are not simply a disciplinary strategy. When used with fidelity and intention, restorative practices form a foundation for the entire school culture. Everyone that has any part in the school community can support this process by simply being open-minded and focused on success. Restorative schools look like and sound like all people in the school are greeting each other in the hallways at arrival and dismissal. Teachers and students are seen having restorative discipline conversations when students need that. Teachers use positive language to discuss students. Teachers acknowledge their own bias when dealing with classroom discipline, and all students are given equal opportunity to discuss their part in a discipline issue and their feelings around that. Each person is given an opportunity to make restorations with the person they've offended or hurt. And all people in the school are open-minded to the process, even when they have big feelings. Just to summarize and to wrap it all together, restorative practices is a whole community process. It is not something new. It's human relationship. It's just being intentional and explicit with those human relationships and understanding that those are vital to getting down to learning. It's outside of that academic piece of our school setting, but the relationships make everything in our building. I hope that as you review this, that you'll consider looking further into restorative practices and how it can benefit your community.